What I'm talking about this week is Venezuela. I'm not going to get into the whole, start at the beginning type thing, because A, I don't care. B, it's too many words that I had mispronounced, too many names. I'm not fluent in Spanish, so I'm not the guy to see for that, is what I'm saying. But early on, in looking up information for this video, I discovered three really, important things I wish I would have discovered really early on, because they told me almost everything I needed to know. Number one, the country is not self-sufficient in agriculture. That means you can't live there. You can, but you're going to be reliant on imports. I mean, there's deserts in America. We don't try to live in them. So it's just a bad idea right off the hop. What you have in Venezuela is its entire history is just full of corruption, stolen elections. Anytime the people tried to uprise and do what was right for themselves, basically, or for the country, it was put down with violent opposition. I mean, just mowed them down, shut it down, and kind of like basically the rest of the world in a certain sense. They have the largest petroleum reserves in the known world, supposedly, in the world. Number three, they have the 8th largest natural gas reserves in the world. And they went from one of the richest countries in Latin America to one of the poorest. How? Corruption, mismanagement, corrupt leadership. I mean, prior to the discovery of oil, it was primarily coffee and cocoa were their big exports. 1973 global oil crisis. Venezuela was one of the founding members of OPEC, and that's the monopoly that controls oil prices for the entire rest of the world, basically. They're one of the founders for that. So in 1973, there's an oil crisis. Prices shoot the moon. 1976, they nationalized the oil industry in Venezuela. Put in a different way, that means the government took over all the independent oil production refineries and facilities and said, those are ours now. We're going to manage them because we know best. Turns out they didn't. By the 1980s, there was a collapse in oil prices. So all those profits that shot the moon are now, they're practically giving the stuff away. And with that went the economy of Venezuela. Trouble with that is the country had nationalized almost everything, from healthcare, education, the oil industry. Everything is dependent. It's basically socialism, which is basically communism. The state controls everything, and we know how good the state is at managing basically anything. By 1996, there's 100% inflation in Venezuela. 1998, Hugo Chavez gets elected, whatever. He takes over. Things are going to be great. And for a second, they were. Oil sales, importing goods, and they're borrowing crap tons of money. Now, why are you borrowing all this money when you have the largest petroleum reserves in the world? Well, so they can steal it. Money meant for the people being stolen from the top. Does that sound familiar at all? So Hugo Chavez, a name that most Americans are familiar with because he's all over the news all the time, he starts his term in 1999. He serves clear through until 2013. The only reason he got out of office then was because he died. It is never a good idea to have any leaders elected or selected, or however you want to say, beyond 3, 4, 5 years. It's just not a good idea. Power corrupts, absolutely. And absolute power takes you straight to the bottom. And that's exactly what happened with Venezuela. All these socialized programs, education, we're taking ours, got the finest schools. They turned the electric grid, it was based off hydroelectric. Water dams generating this. Well, then a big drought comes, and all of a sudden we ain't got any electricity. We'll get to that in a minute. We'll come back. We'll circle back to that. By 2016, 15% of the country was found to be eating what they called food waste of commercial establishments. They're dumpster diving for their food. Chavez is dead. Maduro, I believe, was the new guy's name. He's just as corrupt as the last guy, if not more so. There's people saying he wasn't elected legitimately. I don't know. Okay, it's a mess. And the people are feeling the effects of this mess. By the tail end of 2016, consumer prices had risen 800%. By 2018, inflation had risen, not a misprint, not a misspeak, 1,000,000%. The people can't get toilet paper, they can't get milk, and they can't get flour. They can't get a multitude of things, but those three are the big ones. Along with those, milk, meat, coffee, rice, oil, flour, butter, toilet paper, personal hygiene products, and even medicine. Either can't get it or it's so hard to get it's almost impossible. This is one of the richest countries. You got the largest oil, petroleum reserves in the world, and you can't get milk and butt what? Around about the same time, there's rolling blackouts from the hydroelectric shortage. So Maduro comes out and says, well, government's only going to be working Monday and Tuesday because of the power outages. Oh, so just like in America, basically. Gotcha. Now, this national universal health care, efficiency and work conditions are heavily criticized by anybody from the outside world that came in and supervised this. This is your nationalized health care that everybody's clamoring for. Well, not everybody. A certain percentage of the demographic is clamoring for in America. That's what they want. They want the state to operate the medical facilities. A full 80% of them in Venezuela have just been abandoned because they don't have the money to keep up with them. 80%, that's 8 out of 10 facilities, just walked away from them. This part fascinates me. People are starving in Venezuela, or they were at that time. I don't imagine it's gotten a whole lot better since. It's hard to get good information anywhere in the world, let alone in America. Be that as it may, the people are starving. The average people claim they've lost 18 to 20 pounds just from the lack of cost and availability of food. But 30% of the nation is obese. How? Well, seriously, how is that even possible? How are you obese? You can't get any food. We got to deal with education. That's one of the main demographic doodads. By 2018, 58% of the country's youth had just dropped out of school. 93% of schools nationwide do not meet the requirements to operate. 77% lack food, water, and electricity. These are nationalized schools now. Once again, the government's come and taken over the school system. We're going to do it because we're awesome at management and doing kind of like America. The school system has been nationalized. It hasn't, but it has. No child left behind. How's that working out, by the way? How's the test scores coming? Yeah? No? That's what I figured. 2019, then President Donald J. Trump imposed a total economic embargo against Venezuela. So that's going to help. Dude, any of the stuff that's involved with the IMF and these loans, and they got to be paid back, that is a horrible idea. Never, ever, anywhere can you point to it and say, well, that worked out so well for them. They paid back all the loans. They got their independence. The country's thriving. I can't think of a single example where that has been the case. Instead, it's this constant, well, they had to restructure the loans because they debased the currency so badly, they can't pay for these loans anymore. Or the loan payments, whatever terms those were set up to be, we don't recognize that money anymore. It's worth barely the paper that it's printed on. We got to reorganize the loans. We got to do some shimmies and shammies and flimmies and flammies to keep you in this perpetual cycle of debt that you're never going to be able to repay. By the way, we'll set your policy. We will tell you exactly what needs to happen. At one time, I believe it was around the early 2000s, America got 3% of its oil from Venezuela. I say, oh, big deal, 3%. In America, that's a lot of freaking oil and a lot of freaking money. Did they save? Did they set aside to manage the funds? Did they, plan for the future at all? They did not. They stole it. They lived in the lap of luxury. Let's get some hydroelectric power. Let's buy up the school systems, or just take them. We're going to take control of everything because even if it worked well and you're the leader, sooner or later you're either going to be out of office or dead. And the guy or gal that's coming in after you probably isn't going to be so great about it. And now you got problems. Who do they turn to? The IMF. We need to borrow some money. We need to borrow some money. We need to borrow some money. We need to restructure the loans. Perpetual debt, perpetual corruption. And part of the perpetual corruption being that the IMF will say, okay, here's your leader choices. Pick one of those. He can run, she can run. And the people will decide from those two. And no matter who wins, we have our person in office. So more corruption, more debt, more need to go back with the empty hand. We've got to restructure the loans again. Oh, you want us to do what? Okay, yeah, we'll do that. How much do we get to keep? Okay. Look through the Venezuelan, look at their government properties. It's the same as in America. People are going without. Oh, that part's not the same yet. The people are going without. But the government's got the nicest buildings and cars. They're not buying their own gasoline. They have transportation provided for them, security, lifetime security details, lifetime pensions. They're not struggling a bit. Same thing in Venezuela. You can go and look if you want to. The buildings are immaculate. Government buildings are. So what happens when things get bad like this? Well, the ones that can afford to flee the country. 7 million people. These are dated numbers. It's like 2019 numbers. 7 million people, that's 20% of the country, have just fled. It's got the heck out of there. It's a sinking ship. We're out. A lot of them came to America. What's also baffling is that Colombians will oftentimes immigrate to Venezuela. How bad is it in Colombia that you're going to Venezuela? Whew. So what happens when it gets that bad? Well, I'll tell you what happens. Nobody does nothing because there's nothing can be done. A big black market erupts. People can't afford anything. I remember watching some kind of documentary on it, and this gal was boohooing because she couldn't afford it. And I don't mean to make a light of it. I always feel sympathetic towards the people because they didn't ask for this crap. But she couldn't feed the family, so she's got this necklace. And it's like 4 or 5 generations. This necklace has been in her family. I don't know. But she's going to hawk it on the black market, and it'll be enough money to provide food for the family, supposing they can get the food, for about 3 weeks. I don't quite understand this mentality all now. I say that with the benefit of a full belly, but my point being is, well, what then? After 3 weeks, you're out of food, but now your family heirloom is gone. So the next generation gets screwed out of that too. What's 3 weeks, Hey, we can eat for 3 weeks. Okay, then what? The stray dogs disappeared in Venezuela because people caught them and ate them. There were no rats to be found. There were no mice to be found because the people caught them and ate them. Because when you're starving, you'll eat what's available. You can see the breakdown here on YouTube of some guy in Venezuela did a video on it. Peculiarly enough, 1 ounce of silver fed a family of 6 for 38 days, maybe 34 days, either way, over a month. That's 1 ounce, provided you can get it and you have it to trade. That's better than trading off your family heirlooms, isn't it? I mean, if you're into that, if you want to keep living, you're trying to survive, you're trying to keep your family together, wouldn't an ounce of silver be better than trading off things that were sacred unto the family? I would think so. How many Americans own silver, gold, any kind of other precious metals? Less than 1%. You do what you want to with your money. You want to flout your Bitcoin and your investing prowess. They're coming for all of it, buddy. You might ought to get some metals. I'm just saying, you do what you want to do. I am not the boss of anybody. Just saying, it's an interesting thing. What has happened in Venezuela is a nightmare, as are most of the Latin American countries. It's just corruption, you can't outperform corruption. You might be able to for a while. Sooner or later, it's going to catch up. And when it does, there's no overcoming that. You have to have a total revamp and overhaul. What's happening in America right now? Isn't the court system corrupt? The Department of Justice? They've shown to be corrupt. Your alphabet agencies, your three-letter agencies, they've been shown to be corrupt. Congress is corrupt. Presidency is corrupt. Most of them have been for a long time. We just now have the technology to find out about it. But what happens in corrupt countries? What happens when a lot of the people are having harsh economic problems and inflation is running amok? Where are we at? 30%? I mean 3? But we got 90 billion to give to Ukraine and Taiwan and Israel, you know. I mean, you put the money where you want to put it, it's fine. The trouble with socialism is sooner or later you run out of other people's money. And we're going to run out in America too. It's never worked anywhere it's been tried, ever. Might work for a season. There might be a passage of time where things kind of sort of seem to be improvement, and then it implodes on itself because it's a bad system. It's not going to work in America either. Some of these young people that don't know any better, and we all make mistakes when we're young, and we're all foolish to a certain degree, mostly out of ignorance when we're young, clamoring for socialism because they've been screwed over by what they think is capitalism. It isn't. Clamoring, wanting socialism because they've never lived under it, because they don't know anything about anybody that has tried to live under it. Something to think about. You can put your comments in the doobly-doo. I always read them because I like them. Thank you for watching. I do appreciate your time. I'll see you next time.